Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jill Nimchak with the Wisconsin Out of School Time Alliance, a program of Marshfield Clinic Region of Sanford Health. I want to welcome you today to our webinar on Unlocking Opportunities, Understanding Wisconsin's Shared Childcare Subsidy Program. This informative webinar is designed to help eligible working families access affordable quality childcare. We all know that you are witnessing these challenges firsthand with children and families, and we hope you leave here today with a few more tools that help you navigate these situations with greater confidence. So this event is made possible through a partnership between the Wisconsin Out of School Time Alliance and the Wisconsin Department of Children and Families. So again, with all logistics aside, I am pleased to introduce our speaker for today, David Timmerman. David is the director of the Bureau of Child Care Subsidies Administration for Wisconsin as part of the Wisconsin's Department of Children and Families. Thank you so much, David, for joining us.
Well, thank you again. It's really a pleasure to be here. Honestly, we could talk about Wisconsin shares all day long. So trying to put this into, 50 minutes with some Q&A is actually sort of difficult. So I do like interactive conversations. So if you have questions, as Jill said earlier, please feel free to put them into the chat. While I can talk a lot, doing it straight for 50 minutes is never an easy thing. And again, I want to make sure we address some of the questions that are out there. The Wisconsin Shares Program is a vital part to the families across our state, whether families are engaged in the workforce, early education, or education in general. Somebody's finishing their GED, going to a university or a college. We want to be there with the child care program to support them, support you, to make sure that you have access, again, as Jill stated, to that safe and high quality child care, and presenting you with some Wisconsin Shares subsidies to help offset the cost of care. So with that, I will get us started. And I want to talk a little bit about the background of childcare. So I'm going a little bit into a history lesson. I do love history, so I can get carried away there as well. But really back in 1996, that I was, hopefully a lot of you were born in 1996. I've done presentations where they're like, what? No. But President Clinton signed the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act, PERORA, as we love to call it back then, which created the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. People hear the phrase TANF program a lot. That's what that is. And it also created the Child Care Subsidy Program for working families with low income. And that was really when childcare started. The primary focus was for families who were entering the workforce or going through on-the-job training, something like that. And it was really not so much on the education side. They wanted to support families getting into the workforce. So in '96, this legislation created like this huge block grant child care development fund, which is the largest federal funding source dedicated to helping low-income working families. From 1996 through 2014, so almost 20 years, there were very minimal changes made to the funding system. In 2014, Congress decided to reauthorize the Child Care Development Block Grant for the first time. And a big piece of this reauthorization was a focus around the quality of childcare for infants and toddlers, more family-friendly practices to support stability for the children and the families, and improve the health and safety of programs across the nation. So it wasn't just sending money out for childcare. It was now trying to develop better, higher quality, safer, more stable childcare across the country. So you're going to start seeing that shift in philosophy a little bit, that now we want to engage families who are in education, who are in the workforce. The Wisconsin model of this child care subsidy program was launched in 1997. And if anybody was around back then, that's when the old AFDC program in Wisconsin moved to the Wisconsin Works, or as some people like to call it, the W-2 program. The child care, again, the focus in 1997 was people are going off of AFDC and they were going into the workforce. How can we support them to get into the workforce? Childcare was the answer. We're going to now have a childcare program to support families in paying for childcare and making sure they have access to it across the state. I am old enough that I was actually working in Grant County back in 1997 and was part of the transition from AFDC to the Wisconsin Works program. A little background on who owns this program or who administers the program. So initially, the child care program was administered by the then Department of Health and Family Services. Now it's known as Department of Health Services, and the Department of Workforce Development. Those two agencies worked together to run the child care program. And again, as you can see, there's your Department of Workforce Development. Again, workforce, getting into the workplace was a primary function of the early program. In 2008, Department of Children and Families, where I work, was created under Governor Doyle and assumed all aspects of the child care program. So we pulled whatever DWD had and whatever DHFS had at that point and brought everybody into DCF because it was part of the Children and Families mission. All right, end of the history lesson right there. A little bit about the purpose. I've been sort of sprinkling it in throughout this presentation. The purpose of Wisconsin Shares: support working families with lower incomes by sharing the cost of care. Childcare is expensive. There are studies out there that it's cheaper to send a child through a state university than it is to pay for a child in childcare. We also know that we need to help shape the children's growing brains through the access to safe and high quality care. We want to make sure that the providers out there have the ability, the tools and the resources to teach the children and put them in the best learning environment that they can. We want to support the parents in the workforce. If you're a parent, you've ever had childcare, you know, dropping your child off at the childcare center. I had 5 kids, so well versed in that. If you don't feel like your child's in a safe, high quality environment, it's going to be on your mind all day. So we want to make sure that the child care providers that are out there can offer that support and allow you to feel safe that your child is in a great high quality center or family home while you're at work. And then also we want the Wisconsin Shares program to provide confidence for families. And again, this is around the same thing, that your child is safe, well cared for, so you can focus on what you need to, whether it's for work or for continuing educational activities. A little bit of the organizational outline. Sometimes when you think of the state, you think of this huge conglomerate of agencies, and you don't know really who does what programs. For example, food share, Medicaid is done by the now Department of Health Services. Childcare is done by a separate agency, Department of Children and Families. And we are in Division of Early Care and Education. And every division has an administrator's office. And in our case, we have 5 different bureaus that assist in some way, shape, or form with the child care program. We have the Bureau of Early Care Regulation, and we'll go into what each one does in a second. The Bureau of Child Care Subsidy Administration, Bureau of Operations and Planning, the Bureau of Young Star, and the Milwaukee Early Care Administration. The Bureau of Early Care Regulation has a super important role in this process. They are responsible for the license and regulation of childcare providers across the state. They have licensing specialists in 5 regional offices that go out and do visits, announced and unannounced visit to make sure that the providers are meeting the appropriate standards to be considered a licensed or certified provider across the state. And these types of providers include family group childcare, group childcare centers, day camps, and then there are some public schools that operate childcare programs. They are also monitored by these licensing specialists. Statewide, we have another type of childcare provider, which is called a certified childcare provider. In Milwaukee County, the state runs the childcare program. Therefore, any certified childcare programs in Milwaukee County are also regulated by the Bureau of Early Care Regulation. They also conduct all the federal and state required background checks on all licensees, household members, and employees of the programs. And as I said, they have 5 regional offices, including 1 central office dedicated to completing all of this work. The Bureau of Child Care Subsidy Administration, which is where I come from, oversees the statewide implementation of the SHARES program. What does that mean? It develops policies to better serve children and families. We are constantly trying to adhere to all of state and federal regulations while at the same time making the program as family friendly as possible. We are constantly, as I said, reviewing regulations to ensure compliance. You know, counties answer to the state answers to our federal oversight agency. So there are compliance and regulations up and down that everybody needs to meet. We provide oversight to ensure the proper use of child care funding and do recovery efforts. So we have a program integrity section that works with providers to make sure that the money being received is appropriate and used properly. And then we also have help desks for both the Child Care or Wisconsin Shares program and then program integrity section. And then lastly, we develop, review, and implement new state statutes, or we adjust them. If we have new administrative rules we need to implement or amend in order to make the Wisconsin Shares program more family friendly or easier to manage, we're responsible for all that as well. The Bureau of Operations and Planning provides the resources to the other 4 bureaus within our division. They manage IT projects, budget, they support internal communication efforts regarding the SHARES program, training. This includes training on new and existing child care workers at the state, tribal, and county levels. And then they also have a contract specialist that oversees any related contracts with vendors that are part of the Wisconsin Shares program. Bureau of Young Star oversees the quality initiatives. So Wisconsin has a quality rating and improvement system called the QRIS, and a lot of states, tribes, and territories across the country have QRIS systems. In Wisconsin, we call it Young Star. What is Young Star? It provides support through providing resources, training, technical assistance to providers to enhance that quality of care. This is where I talked about we want to make sure providers have high quality resources, tools, etc., to better serve the children in their care. The Bureau of Young Stars supports the setting of consistent standards by defining what high quality care is here in Wisconsin, and also assists parents in finding local childcare options that match their family's lifestyle, budget, and individual needs. And then lastly, we have MICA, or Milwaukee Early Care Administration. So as I just said a second ago, the state runs the child care program in Milwaukee County. MICA is a state agency that's part of our division that completes the child care authorizations for children and families living in Milwaukee County. These are families who are working or those who are engaged in approved educational activities. Milwaukee County also provides Wisconsin Shares training for licensed and certified childcare providers and supports and maintains the integrity of the Wisconsin Shares program through some client investigation functions. Milwaukee County is large, the most heavily populated county, of course, in our state. They have almost 60% of the Wisconsin Shares caseload. So when MICA makes changes or needs changes, you can imagine it has a ripple effect across the state because they are by far the most populous area. So very, very important part of our division. All right. How do you apply for shares? Let's get into how this process works. Multiple ways you can apply as a family. You can do it online. Families can apply through the Access tool. The Access tool is a statewide tool that families can utilize to access not only childcare, but food share, Medicaid, Badger Care Plus, Wisconsin Works, and some other benefit programs. We are going to make this PowerPoint available to you after this meeting, and it will have links in it. So you can actually click the link and it will bring up, this is what the Access online website looks like. And you can see you can apply for benefits right here. It'll walk you through the process. They also have a My Wisconsin app. Of course, there's an app for everything these days. So you can actually put it on your phone, which is awesome. Then you can also do in-person applications or by phone. Not going to lie, the in-person does not happen near as much as it used to. So for anybody who's been around the programs for a while, you remember you could go right to your local agency, go into their office, sit down face to face with a person, a county tribal worker, and apply for benefits. That is slowly going away and being replaced by the online access tool or by phone. If you want to do an in-person or by phone, there's also a link there. And on our DCF website, which is, do a little plug, is full of resources for you. And I have it highlighted throughout this presentation. You can select the agency in the county that you live in, and it will tell you exactly where it is and what the telephone number is to reach out to them. Now, it doesn't say whether or not they'll do in person, but what you can do is call that local agency number that's listed here, and they will let you know if they have an in-person option. When you get up into northern counties, which are less populated and more rural in nature, often the telephone or online is much easier because you don't have the travel time to get to the agency. Okay, how to apply for shares continued. A little bit different. If you live in Milwaukee County, you can, again, do the online access, which is really a slick tool to use. You can call the Milwaukee Economic Support Agency, and I'll just really briefly touch on that Milwaukee is a two-step process, and we're going to get into this a little bit more, but you're going to hear MILES, and that's the Milwaukee Enrollment Services. And what they do is they do the eligibility for childcare, food share, Medicaid, Badger Care, and then Mika does the second step of the child care process, which is developing the authorization, which is based on a specific provider. So it's a two-step process where the balance of the state, usually it's the same worker who does both of those, the eligibility and the authorization. All right, now it's test time. So everybody get your pencils out. What have we discussed? Anyone? Bridget Cullen, maybe? Background of the child care program? Purpose? I was really pleased, by the way, I could figure out how to make this happen with these things coming up really slowly. The structure of Wisconsin's program, and then how to access. So I'll just take a breath there, see if there's any questions around that first part, and take a drink. Okay, nothing? All right. Program requirements. What does it take to become eligible for shares? I promise this is the last slide with this little motion thing. The application is broken down to a two-step process. Eligibility, which I just sort of talked about in the previous slide. For eligibility, you must meet all financial and non-financial eligibility criteria in order to be determined eligible. The authorization, parents must select a child care provider, a specific location, and then say, I'm ready to tell you how much child care I need. I'm ready to get this authorization so you can give me the subsidy benefits so I can give them to the provider. And as I said earlier, for local and tribal and county agencies, the same agency will complete both of these functions 99% of the time. For Milwaukee County, Miles completes the eligibility and Mika completes the authorization. Okay. So everybody usually wants to know what's it take to become eligible. What are the non-financial requirements? So identification of the assistant group. So the assistance group is what we determine to be the group that has legal responsibility across and to each other, and their eligibility requirements are going to count towards the test. So like an individual who's a parent included in the assistance group. The individual's dependent children is in the assistance group. If they have a spouse or non-marital co-parent, they're in the assistance group. Just have a little note there. If you have a shared placement, if there's a divorce situation, then both parents can have their own assistance groups for the time the child's in their home. How old does the applicant need to be? The person applying, so I'm not talking about the child, the person applying must be at least 18 years of age, unless they're a minor who is living in a group home licensed by the state of Wisconsin or independent living, a high school student, or is enrolled in an equivalent program, or married. So if it's a minor with a child who needs child care benefits, they would have to meet one of those 3 bullet points. What about the age of the child? In order to be eligible for child care, the child must be age 12 or younger and age 18 or younger if the child has a verified disability. So if there's no disability, a child 12 and under is eligible for the program. If a child comes into the program and turns 13 during the time that they're authorized for childcare, that childcare eligibility will continue until the end of that authorization period. So it doesn't just stop once the child turns 13. Non-financial continued, a big one, childcare cooperation. Each parent included in the application must cooperate with child support. That includes identifying, locating absent parents, if needed, establishing legal percentage of any child, not percentage, parentage of any child, sorry about that, and obtaining any available payments that they have a right to. There are exemptions to child support. An infant less than 60 days old, parents with unborn children. Um, there's also good cause exemptions for domestic abuse, sexual assault, some of those. I haven't listed everything, but there's, as with most of our requirements, there are exemptions that are allowed. Okay, another big thing is you have to participate in an approved activity. So this comes down even from the federal regulations that in order to receive the subsidy program, you need to be in working or looking for work kind of status. So put up some examples here of approved activities. Employment, including self-employment, education, participation in Wisconsin Works, which is our TANF program to assist people with getting into the workforce. Tribal temporary assistance for needy families, TANF, and participation in the Food Share Employment and Training, or FSET, Job Search or Work Program. And then lastly, participation in the Learn Fair program, which is an older program that was around, has been around for some time and is not really utilized very more, but it is still, if somebody's in the program, they can use it. What's the newest thing here? Education. For a long time in the state of Wisconsin, if you were a family and you were going back to school, you still had to work 20 hours a week. We just recently were able to take away that work requirement and simply say, you're going back to school, you're in a trade school, you're in a community college, you're in a four-year institution, you can only work on your education without that work requirement. And that is a big deal. I'm not going to walk through these. They're going to be here for you to look at. These are like the initial income application income limits. So you can see a group size, and then this would be your monthly gross income. If you're under this, then you would be eligible for the program. For ongoing, this is what that would look like. When you come into the program, we look at 200% FPL, which is the federal poverty limit that is set every year by the federal government and sent out to all the states, tribes, territories. When you are in the program, in order to have to leave the program, the federal government says you have to be 85% of the state median income. And you can see these dollar amounts are substantially higher. So we don't want you to come in the program, make, $2 more an hour and all of a sudden have to leave the program. So that's what this is. It's trying to build in the process so you have room to grow. The worst things that we used to hear is that somebody figured out if they took $1 an hour raise, they would then get kicked out of the childcare program, so they would have to turn down the raise. Because in the long run, the raise would not provide the same amount of benefit that the childcare program does. We want to get away from that. What do we count as income? Money, wages, salary, self-employment, dividends. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these. This will be available. Unemployment insurance, alimony, maintenance payments, child or family support. If it's greater than 1,250 a month, then it all gets counted. So that's an important one. Any interest, rental income, Income that's not counted. Child support payments that are less than 1,250. If the minor dependent children earn money in the assistance group, that is not counted. If any of the minor dependent children have SSI or supplemental security income, that is not counted. State and federal tax refunds are not counted. Kinship care, subsidy guardianship, foster care, adoption assistance payments, not counted. Somebody gives you a bunch of cash, not counted. That's always my favorite. All right, there's a liquid asset limit. The asset limit for the Wisconsin shares is 25,000 per assistance group. We look at the assets whenever somebody initially applies or during the subsequent renewals. It's a self-declaration. If you're sitting across or you're on a phone or you're doing the online application and you say, I have $2,000 in assets, that's all you need to say. It doesn't count your house, doesn't count anything except for those examples on the screen, cash on hand, checking accounts, savings, money markets, credit union. It's not looking at your car. It's very straightforward. However, if you say I have 50,000, then we're going to ask you to verify it. But if you say I do not have 25,000 or more, it's just simply stating that fact. We move on. All right, you're in the process of applying. What do you need to identify? What do you need to provide the local agency or MICA when you're applying for childcare? You need to verify all the identities of the applicant and all parents in the assistance group. You need to identify, give the social security number for the child for whom Wisconsin Shares is being requested, or show that you have applied for a social security number for that child. You have to show that you're a Wisconsin residency and verify your residence, your home address. Could be a bank statement, could be a utility bill, could be a lease, a lot of a mortgage, a lot of different options there. The next one, U.S. citizenship of the children for whom Wisconsin Shares is requested. Notice this just says the children, not the parents. We're not asking for the citizenship or immigration status of the parents of the children for whom Wisconsin Shares is requested. And then lastly, if there's any out-of-home placements, meaning any of the children were placed there by a child welfare agency, again, if they're in kinship care, you would need to verify that a local child welfare agency placed the child in your home and verify the kinship care documentation. I want to pause on that one because some of these things are really big topics nowadays. The citizenship, immigration status, do you have any questions? It's only for the children, not the parents. Okay. All right, so you're non-financially eligible, you gave them all the verification, you met all the approved activities, etc. Now we need to see if you make the program. We looked financially and we looked at those dollar amounts a couple of slides ago. We are looking for you to verify your employment. So do you have a pay stub? Do you have a couple of pay stubs to show your income, your employment? If you're self-employed, do you have tax documentation from previous tax years? If not, there's forms that we would have you fill out called self-employment forms. And then we're also going to ask for verification around any unearned income that you may get. So if you're receiving something like SSI or any other type of benefit, we would ask you for documentation around that particular income. We have continuously tried to reduce the amount of verification throughout this program. And it's not just childcare, it's across the board. It's this, food share has been doing the same thing, and Medicaid and Badger Care. We want to take away the length of time it takes to get access to our programs. We want to simplify the process, and it's really going well. It makes things a lot faster and takes a lot of the stress off of the families who are really trying to get something done quickly and get access to a resource that they need. Sometimes like the next day, it depends what's happening in their world, but sometimes they need access right away. So we really want to simplify things. And here's just another screen talking about it. So employment, self-employment. If you're in Transform Milwaukee Jobs, if you're in an apprenticeship, if you're in Wisconsin Works, education, these are the approved activities. So if you're in education, we'll ask for your class schedule or your enrollment information. If you have a medical exemption that says you can't do an approved activity, we're going to ask for that. If you're in food share, employment training, we'll ask for that as well. Okay, test time again. What have we discussed? Oh, I lied. I forgot this one had that too. Sorry. We talked about the shares program requirements, the non-financial eligibility, the financial, the verification requirements. What do you need to verify? Whoops. Now I'm going to take a breath. Okay. All right. And now we're going to talk about what happens when you're through that process. You met all the non-financial, you met all the financial. The worker says, congratulations, you're eligible for Wisconsin shares. Now what happens? So once eligible, you need to select a provider. Now, you don't need to wait to select a provider. If you already know that you have a provider you're going to go to, and you're just simply seeing if you're eligible for shares, obviously the step is already completed. But when you select a provider, that provider needs to be able to receive Wisconsin Shares childcare authorizations, which means they must be licensed by the state. They must be certified by the state or the county or tribe, or they could be a childcare program monitored by a public school, established and then monitored by DCF. If you live close to the border, any part of the state, you can use out-of-state providers as long as the child receiving the Wisconsin Shares subsidies resides in Wisconsin. And there's special nuances for out-of-state providers, but that is an option. To serve children utilizing shares, a provider must participate in the Young Star program. We talked a little bit earlier about Young Star. They have to be a minimum of a 2-star provider. So Young Star goes from a 1-star to a 5-star. 5 is the highest level of quality. The 1-star providers are not eligible to receive Wisconsin Shares subsidies for children in their care. The provider also has to have a completed contract with Fidelity National Information Services, called FIS for short. And FIS is the contracted vendor that issues this neat little My Wisconsin Childcare card that anybody who applies for Wisconsin Shares receives. Here's a couple other things providers must do. Providers must submit their full and part-time prices in writing or electronically, either to their local agency or to the state. Also, if a child care provider charges a registration fee, they must submit their fee amounts to us in writing or electronically, because in the last 2 years, we have made a policy change that allows us to reimburse families who have to pay a mandatory registration fee, which was great news as well, because previous to a couple years ago, we would not cover that. And then lastly, childcare providers are required to have a written payment agreement with every family that utilizes their childcare program that receives Wisconsin shares. All right, talked really briefly about program integrity. DCF is responsible to ensure that all the money we get, all the funds, both federal and state, are spent properly. Now, BCCSA, the Bureau of Child Care Subsidy Administration, has a program integrity section with 9 auditors, policy analysts, supervisors who provide guidance on the identification of fraud to local agencies. They provide guidance on investigative processes, and they train and educate stakeholders on Wisconsin shares rules and policies. Some news and announcements. As I've sort of said throughout here, we are constantly trying to better this program, make it better for the children and families across the state, increase the amount of funding that goes into the program. One of the federal requirements is that if you're a Wisconsin Shares Subsidy um, child, you should have access to the same types of childcare that a private pay child would have. So we are constantly adjusting our childcare rates to make sure that everybody has the same access. For example, in fall of 2023, we also did a significant change from developing our subsidy rates based on an hourly calculation to moving them to a part-time or full-time amount. And what that means is if you're going to a provider and you say, I only need 10 hours of care, and the provider's like, well, I charge a part-time rate, whether you bring the child 20 hours or 10 hours. We need to mirror that private pay activity or the way it's done in the private care. So we changed it. So for example, if you now only take your child 10 hours, but moving forward, the child care provider says, I'm going to charge you for 20, we can now work with you and that provider to make sure that they receive their um, full amount that they charge. And then also fall of 23, as I said previously, families can now request funds to pay for registration fees. Then effective of summer of 2024, we raised the initial income limit to make more families eligible. Multiple occasions, we've raised the rates across the children age groups and provider types to make more children eligible and have better access to providers across the state as well.
David, can I
Yes.
ask you a quick question? One of
Yes.
our folks asked, when talking about current rates, who do those
Yes.
get sent to?
So the money, if they're asking where the money goes, I assume.
I think they're talking about maybe the current rates.
So if a provider wants to submit their rates, then they would send that either electronically through the provider portal, which is an online system that providers can access, or they can send it to their local agency. So say you're in Dane County, your provider, you want to report your childcare rates, you can send it right to the Dane County Health and Human Services Department, or you can enter it online as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let me know if that answers the question.
I will go back real quick while we're waiting there. When I had our nice little card, there it is. So just really briefly, when you're found eligible for Wisconsin shares and you get an authorization developed, you're going to get sent this card from FIS. And FIS is going to um, ask for banking information potentially in some cases, but they're going to allow this access to you, and the money goes on this card. So when you go to the provider, then you're going to have a couple of different ways to pay that provider, because we used to send the money directly to the providers and not the families. But back in 2017 or so, when the EBT card came, the money then went to the parent. And the parent and the provider were supposed to work together to determine when they would get paid and how they would pay them. So some providers could have what's called a point of sale device. You swipe your card, you enter information, and the money goes right to the bank account of the provider. Otherwise, you could use a phone system. You call in, you punch in the numbers that you're given, you punch in the provider information, the money goes directly to the provider. So the families now are in the middle, they get the money, and then they provide the funds off their card to the provider. So the system has changed that way. And really, it wanted to have the families more engaged in the process. And again, a lot of things that were done to mirror the private sector. Okay, hopping back, I know we're watching the clock too, Jill. Resources available. Again, there's going to be a lot of information on our websites for you. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there's tons of information about who to contact, where to look for information, etc. The one thing, couple of things I want to point out, there's a brand new Wisconsin Shares childcare estimator. I want to make sure it's there. So this is a brand new web page, and it's still in the process of being updated and improved. But what you can do is enter the number of members in your family, talk about your income, the number of children, and it will actually give you an estimate. So let's say monthly we have 3,000, and then we can just pick somebody, care needed, full time. And this actually pulls up exact real-time providers. Oop, that wasn't what I wanted, sorry. So like in this case, one child, the monthly income was 2,000, subsidy amount would be 126. And I just made up numbers. So as you adjust it, this is a neat little way to get just a general idea of how much your care might cost. Another one I just want to point out really quickly is the child care finder. And what that will do is take you to this Youngstar webpage where you can put in your address, you can change the amount, the location mileage, and put in the type of providers with the star levels, and it will find providers that meet the criteria that you put in, whether it's within 5 miles of you, 40, 30, etc. That's a really nice way to find out if there are providers in your area and give you all the information to contact them. I went over 5 minutes. We did it. That's the entire presentation. I feel like I went really fast, but if you have questions, let's do it.
So yes, we have about 4 minutes before we hit our 60-minute. So if you do have questions, please, you can type them in the chat. So Erica is saying Wisconsin Youth Company informs families of child care finder websites if our programs are full for summer or school year. It is a great link for families.
Yay. Yes.
Right? Yay, it works. So as we are wrapping up, and I will give you a moment to put questions in the chat. I will just answer a few things that are coming in. So in order to get credit for today's webinar, it does have to go through the registry. So you'll need to give us 3 or 4 days to get that information in there, and then you will receive your credit for that. We do record this on Zoom, so you do have to meet the attendance requirements for that. So if you stayed on the entire time, that will help. But let me just kind of check what we have, some things here before I move on. One person says we want to offer our private pay parents a sibling discount. Do we have to offer that to subsidies as well?
You don't have to. Well, you should treat your private pay children, families, the same as the Wisconsin Shares subsidy families. So I would encourage you to offer that. And we are in the process of changing our discount policies, so it's beneficial to the family. The current policy makes it not so family friendly. So that is something probably within the next year you're going to see. So I would encourage you to offer that to the shares, families that utilize shares as well.
And then David, we have a couple more things coming in. So
Yeah.
another one is, should I encourage families that were once denied, and this is eligibility, to try again for eligibility?
Yes. Policies change, situations change. Absolutely.
And then here's another one. With newer education and improved activity for non-financial requirements, do they need to be I'm losing it, a full-time student, or is there some kind of minimum hours of education required? It's a great question.
Yeah, that is a really good question. But no, what's going to happen is the child care is going to be based on your enrollment status. So if you're taking, 6 credits versus 15, your need for child care is going to be based on that.
What about teachers' kids discounts? If we offer to a private pay, do we have to give the state subsidy as well?
Yeah, again, I would encourage you to treat families that utilize the shares program the same.
Okay.
And again, we're shifting the policy to make it a benefit for the family. So.
Great. Well, I wanted to just say thank you one more time to David for being here today. This was really great information. I would also like to say thank you to our registrants for joining today and for the work that you do on behalf of children and families in the state of Wisconsin. I hope that you have an opportunity in the coming weeks to utilize some of these strategies or information to share the message. Every little bit counts. Just a reminder, some of you are asking, this information will get emailed to you directly with a link with the YouTube. This video will go up on the Wisconsin Out of School Time Alliance YouTube channel, and you will also receive a copy of the slides. So you'll be able to access the links that were on there. You'll just need to give us a few days to get that up and back to you, but you will receive an email from me. However, if you have further questions, you are welcome to email them to WASTA, that is the Wisconsin Out of School Time Alliance. I just put in the chat our email address and our website, so you can go to the website for any further professional development opportunities. Thank you again for joining us today.